I'm Jennifer Griffin, National Security Correspondent for Fox News Channel. Welcome to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and our discussion on the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation. The program is produced by the American Veterans Center and spotlights the experiences of several extraordinary Americans. We'll discuss their injuries, their recovery process, and resources available to all wounded veterans. We begin our program with an exploration of the Wounded Warrior Experience, the injuries, the reactions, and the recoveries. On our first panel, Joshua Chiarini, Navy Corpsman, veteran of 3 tours to Iraq and recipient of the Silver Star. Robert Bartlett, retired Army Staff Sergeant injured by an Iranian-designed EFP bomb in Iraq in 2005. J.D. Williams, retired Army Staff Sergeant wounded by an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan in 2010. And representing Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, Jim Martinson, wounded by a landmine in the Vietnam War. Welcome, everyone. Joshua, let's start with you. I understand that 3 military services turned you down when you tried to enlist because you had asthma. How in the world did you end up in Anbar Province?
Yes, so I joined the military when I was in high school, and they thought I had asthma, and it was actually turning out to be bronchitis. My record, the year was 2000, there was nothing going on. And I ended up joining the United States Navy because they sent me in for medical testing and found out it was nothing. And then I was, as a Navy corpsman, I was a medic basically, so I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and 9/11 happened right around that time when I was in school learning how to be a Marine corpsman. And so shortly after, we went to Iraq, and I deployed with 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, and into the Anbar province in 2004. We discovered the IEDs essentially, and my first, when I was hit, I was in a Humvee and got hit by a car bomb. It looked like a taxi sitting on the side of the road. As we drove by it, the whole taxi exploded, and it was driving down the road one minute, and next thing you know, it was blacked out. And I thought I had lost my legs because when we woke up, my gunner had fallen down on top of me. He was bleeding out all of my legs, and we dragged him out of the truck and was working on him. And my passenger had lost most of his hand and some other pretty nasty injuries. But as a corpsman, you just go to work and you're doing what you're doing it, and realized I had been torn up pretty good in my hand, and it took some small injuries there. But we continued on with the fight that day, and then the day I received the Silver Star was my 2nd tour. And after many IEDs, unfortunately, about 100 casualties between 3 tours that I had treated with multiple things. And that Silver Star incident was a regular day, 4-vehicle convoy driving down the road, and these guys were putting an improvised explosive device near the first vehicle. When it detonated, it was more of a diversionary. So the protocol at the time was drive out of the kill zone, everybody dismounts from the vehicle. And they did, and that secondary device went out when everybody was outside the vehicle. So I watched them all disappear in a cloud of smoke. And once again, as a corpsman, you got to get out there and treat your Marines, get in the fight. So jumped out, started running towards them. And it was a complex ambush. They had us, they were shooting at us from the front and the side, an L-shaped type ambush. And when I got up there, the interpreter had lost his arm from the collarbone down. Another guy was burnt real bad. And I looked up over the hood of the Humvee, and there was about 30 insurgents or so close in our position. So I looked at the Marines and was like, hey, stay in the fight. We're about to get overrun. And so we were able to fight our way out of that. And it's kind of funny when you think about combat when you get shot at. But I thought back to, I was thinking of G.I. Joe and in Rambo, because I'm like, what am I going to do in this moment? Because the position that we were in, we were taking so much fire, there was no cover. And I was like, and the 2nd truck was like a truck-style Humvee. So I was like, well, if we can get to that truck, we'll have some sort of cover. So I was like, well, I'll drag him back there and shoot at the same time. So I was pulling him back and trying to return fire. I figured, you get shot, you're going to put your head down. So we got us all inside that truck. I was able to render aid and fight them off long enough to get us to the quick reaction force. Got there. And testament to those wounded Marines staying in the fight.
What about your injuries? What was the hardest part? What do you remember about being injured?
Being injured was not even realizing it, to be honest with you. The initial blast, you don't feel it, like you're just working. You're on pure adrenaline. The body has this natural way of releasing this medicine that it doesn't allow you to feel pain. And when I was working on one of the Marines, I noticed my hand wasn't working that great. I was like, what the heck? And there was just so much blood from him that he had lost. It was just kind of surreal in a sense, And then afterwards, when the adrenaline wore off him, the medevac had gone, I just kind of collapsed on the sidewalk, and the Marines came over and they were able to patch me up and say, hey, Doc, we're going to get back in the fight.
Robert, you were injured in Iraq by an Iranian EFP. That was one of those incredibly powerful explosive devices. It's a copper projectile basically sliced your head from top to through your jaw. What do you remember about that day in Iraq?
Everything. I was never knocked out, so even my gunner who lost his legs, he was knocked out. My truck commander was killed next to me. But what cut me in half from the left corner of a temple down through my jaw actually took the top of my truck commander's head off and then went out the other side of the vehicle. So, you know, I'm just blessed to be alive, and I just remember everything. I mean, I could tell you, I could see the rocks crossing the front of the vehicle, you know, over the hood of the vehicle and the Humvee. You know, I just remember everything, every little detail, you name it, I know it.
And there were 3 times that they pronounced you nearly dead. And
yeah, they had to resuscitate me 3 times. So I mean, I love medics because they don't give up on me, you know. And
Corpsman up.
yeah, that's right.
That's it. That's it.
Right.
Rah.
Yeah, so I died twice in Iraq, and then the day I arrived at Walter Reed, so 3 times over 5 days, they had to resuscitate me and get me going again. But yeah, it's all worth it, you know. It's the best thing I ever did.
What do you feel was your toughest moment, your darkest moment, and how did you get out of that?
Well, like Josh said, you know, when you get in, you know, there was a time in the vehicle when I just looked over and I saw what happened to my buddy. He was killed instantly, and so I just started to give up. I had internal bleeding and collapsed lung and 3rd-degree burns to my face and hands. And so I just, you know, with every breath I was taking, I was losing a breath. So he'll tell you, if you don't focus on staying alive in that point, you actually will die. So I was, you know, slowly losing my internals while filling up with blood and cutting off my oxygen supply. So then my gunner tried to stand up, and he had, you know, so much damage to his legs that he actually collapsed down and fell down on top of me. So I did the best thing I could to try to straighten out his legs, and we put his back towards the front windshield where the radios used to be that became shrapnel, and then we straightened it as much as we could out, and he was just wincing in pain. I just leaned over in his lap. I didn't have to say anything, and he just looked at me, I looked at him, and we were going to die together. And, you know, you just do whatever it takes, you know. Truck commander opened up the door. I can still hear him open up the door. Took 3 yanks, and they got that door and the grinding of the hinges. And then he pulled the truck forward so the other 2 vehicles could move through and they could load us in and get out of there and get to a life flight. But I can tell you step by step what happened to me.
You've paid tribute to the doctor who rebuilt your jaw, and there was that
Dr.
day
Rodriguez.
that you could actually turn to your wife and tell me about that.
So I had surgeries for 4.5 years getting rebuilt, titanium jaw, teeth, and skin transplants from other parts of my body, just to rebuild my lips and my eyelid. And you just, when you're a guy with half a face and you're single and you see your face for the first time, you're like, what woman is going to want a guy with half a face, you know? And so a lot of vets go through that, you know, whether they're missing limbs or whatever. But I was 31 years old at the time, so I'd kind of lived a wild life, and I just figured I'd be a priest or something, you know? That's what my friends said. They all left.
But you got married.
Yeah, so I met my wife. I got to kiss her one time before I deployed to Iraq. I was home on leave, and so before I lost my lips, I got to kiss her one time, and then I was too old. She wouldn't date me. I'm 7 years older than my wife, and after I got blown up, I guess she was old enough and I was okay. So we started dating after that.
Now, JD, tell me about your experience in Afghanistan. You were injured in 2010. You lost both legs, an arm, and yet you are a bow hunter to this day. You still are out there hunting. Tell me about the day you were injured and what was the hardest part for you and how did you come back?
We were doing this, one of the biggest operations in Afghan. It was Operation Dragon Strike. And I was in a recon element, infantry scout platoon, and we ended up taking over this place we called the Alamo. We lost like 13 Americans there, and they ended up wanting my guys to hold this position down till we could reinforce and eventually retake this whole entire village. Well, about a month there, we had an explosion happen like the night before, and 2 guys got killed, and they were like, all right, we're gonna send your team in there. They wanted us to basically establish positions where we could eliminate Taliban setting in IEDs in the village. And rolling out that morning, October 9th, my team leader looked at me and he was like, hey, you know you have like 80% chance of taking contact out there tonight. And I was looking at him and I just had an M4 and he had a 203. I was like, give me your rifle. So I took his rifle and walked in. It was probably, I think it was like around 8:30 in the morning. I noticed a wheelbarrow tipped over on the middle of this dirt trail, and I halted my team right there. There was only 3 other guys with me that day, and before I knew it, I looked up to my 1 o'clock, and there was Taliban about 50 yards from me. So as I was lifting my rifle up, they detonated a .152 round underneath me, and then we were in a pretty nasty gunfight afterwards for 5-10 minutes or something like that. And yeah, I got lucky on that day. I had a blast over there.
You had a blast. All right. All right. And you are working with a group, Coalition's Heroes Thanking Heroes. And how is hunting and getting back out hunting? How did you get back out hunting? What kind of hunting are you doing?
So I hunt all over the world, Africa, British Columbia. I'm originally from Montana, so I grew up a big game hunter. Outdoors is essentially what like healed me completely. So I ended up founding my own organization to take combat vets, because I felt like it wasn't just Purple Heart recipients that were killing themselves. It was the combat vet that, you know, like whenever I go out to a restaurant and I'm with like a bunch of my brothers and we're all sitting at a, you know, I always get recognized because of my injuries. And that was something that always bothered me. So I was always like, you know, I always tell people you got to do the things that you love in life in order to be happy. And hunting was a big thing for me. Being a bow hunter was a big thing. So I started doing the things I love, and I'm healed completely.
Amazing. Jim, you were injured in Vietnam. Tell me about the Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, how it helped you. Tell me about your injuries. You have 2 prosthetics. I'm sure the prosthetics have improved since the Vietnam War. And you're also a golfer, a para-golfer.
Well, it's been a great life. I can honestly say it's been a great life. And I'm 50 years post-injury this year. So
wow.
With that being said, there's a bunch of rough, bumpy roads you go on. It's crazy life. I was hit with a landmine on June 29th. 3 of my buddies were killed. I just went to the wall earlier today and looked at that spot where I really should have been on that wall. No tourniquets. We didn't have tourniquets. We used whatever we had, shoestrings. Things were so different than what you guys have, and I'm so thankful that you have that. I don't know how I lived. I went unconscious on June 29th. I woke up on July 4th in Yokohama, Japan, 4th of July, with a big blast. and I look back and I say, how did it happen? How did I live? How did those guys not? But everything's so different. And one of the things that make things really real in this world is the support you have from people. People that are reaching out to you and touching you and caring about you. The Purple Heart organization, which I'm involved with, really does that. It's incredible. We're at a golf course, an American Lake Veterans Golf Course in the VA property, but it's ran 100% by veterans. No paid staff, and it's unreal. I started playing in a para-golfer, and then I found out these guys have these really cool prosthetics. Now, remember, I've been hurt 50 years, so my prosthetics were oily and greasy, and they made funny noises. These prosthetics have a microprocessor in the knee, so I started playing standing up. And I thought, wow, just like you did with the bow and arrow. I never thought I'd ever golf. I raced wheelchairs, I played basketball, I did all kinds of sports, but I didn't think that golf would be one of them. But that golf course takes veterans and says, come on out. And all people that are veterans, whether they have a disability or not, they touch their lives. And Purple Heart has really been powerful in that.
Where is that golf course, Jim?
Lakewood, Washington, right next to Fort Lewis. Some of you have been stationed at Fort Lewis. I actually got drafted at Fort Lewis, went all the way through the military, and spent 1 year at Madigan Hospital at Fort Lewis. So I just started in Seattle and ended up in Seattle.
And Robert, tell me about you're a fly fisherman, and
Yeah.
Project Healing Waters is really another way to get back out in nature. It seems like there's a common theme here: getting back out in nature, getting active, that is really part of this road to recovery. Tell me about Project Healing Waters.
I was the first vet in Project Healing Waters, and then I was put on the board of Healing Towers, which is this, we were partners with Healing Waters, and we take vets on Alaska experience and get them behind, just get them out in nature again, let the nature heal them. I'm very involved in whatever's going to stop veteran suicide. I've got a lot of vets who've gone that route that I've met throughout the years, and just couldn't take it anymore. And if we save one, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they saved me,
Yeah.
Joshua, what other resources did you rely on to sort of come back, and what are the things that you think are out there that people don't know enough about?
Biggest thing for me was staying in the fight. That's what we taught on the battlefield there, and just coming back home, getting vets to get involved in doing things, is stay in the fight. I had a lot of struggle with PTSD and trying to find my place back in the world, and started working with military and police officers and first responders, taking what I'd learned on the battlefield medicine, transitioning it to the civilian world, and teaching active shooter response and things like that, and trying to save lives here in the civilian world.
You're working as an EMT now up in Rhode Island?
Yes, ma'am, a firefighter up there in Rhode Island.
A firefighter, and you're also part of a training program for EMTs?
Yes, ma'am. Helping doing that. It's a self-aid, body aid for gunshot wound care for police officers that are getting killed on the streets here in America. And I said, why can't we treat police officers and other wounded people the same exact way as we do in the mountains of Afghanistan and the streets of Iraq? So
you guys have all overcome so much. What would you say to those who are out there who need to take that first step? What's the first step that they take? And what are the signs of post-traumatic stress that are preventing them from maybe taking that first step?
Isolation. They isolate themselves from their family, their friends, stop making those phone calls. And I call them all the time, I bug them. They're like, you got to get out, let's go. Because they'll close themselves off, they won't sleep well, their sleep gets worse. They start going downhill after that. Once the sleep goes, then the depression starts kicking in, then the isolation. I mean, it's just a
and the chemical dependency.
There you go.
It exacerbates the PTS symptoms, certainly.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah. What other resources are out there that you think people need to know about?
To me, there's just everything. It's unreal, because when I got hurt, the one thing that helped me a lot was finding wheelchair basketball. And I thought, I didn't think I'd ever get to sweat again. I mean, I really wanted to perspire. I wanted to breathe hard. And then from there, I went into road racing. If you ever watched Forrest Gump and everybody started running in the 70s, I was one of those same guys who was in a wheelchair racing and pushing. But if you go to the Purple Heart or you go to these organizations and just call them and realize, and what really gets me is this panel right here, and if somebody's watching it, to be able to realize that we all have something to happen to us, but we're just as good as we ever were. In fact, I think I'm probably better. So in the long run, you look at it, you think, oh, this life is really good. Things are different, but it's still good.
What about people, civilians that you meet who haven't gone through war, who've not been part of the military? How do they react to you, and what are your recommendations for them? Sometimes maybe they feel sorry for you, but what would you say to them to put them at ease and have them understand that what you've been through has actually made you so much stronger?
I'd say get involved. Like, I mean, Mother Teresa said, you don't have to save the world, right? So all you have to do is help those who are nearest you. So look at the vets in your neighborhood, look at the vets in your city or town or whatever. Create some group and just, listen, government can never do love. Tax money will never do love. But the individual will do love. And so with that love, everything that ever happened to those military veterans makes it worth it.
Are there certain VA resources that are out there that you're finding are useful now? I mean, there's been a lot of attention on the VA and a lot of improvements made. What would you say, what advice do you have on that front?
Stick to the older veterans there. You know, they're always helping you get around places, showing you around. They're the ones, they know the VA a lot better than I do anyways, you know. So it's like I always look to the older guys that are there to, like, you know, help get me through everything. Kind of getting the older brotherhood together again, you know.
Not me. You know, the Veterans Administration has been incredible. I mean, 50 years ago, you lose your legs. Fortunately, Purple Heart, some of these organizations can kind of lead you through that. that whole process, which really helped me. But, you know, they've never not been there for me. You know, these legs I'm sitting on are $70,000 each. You know, the VA paid for them. The wheelchairs that we get, the stuff that we do, they're really reaching out. And the Veterans Administration is for all veterans. It's not just for, boy, get that out of your head. It's not just for a guy with no legs and no finger, a guy with no legs and arm, and each one of our disabilities. It's for all of our veterans. And you remember that, because I see a lot of guys and girls out here that are going to be veterans someday, and maybe already are. So it's for you. It's there.
Tell me about these prosthetics and the improvements that have been made just even in the last 10 years. What are you seeing, and what should we know, and what should somebody who maybe doesn't know about the latest and greatest prosthetics, who may need them, what should they know?
The prosthetics are really interesting. When I first started, I had a hydrocadence, and it actually had oil, and it actually would leak oil and things like that. So when you walk onto your toe and you step over your heel, your knee would bend. This actually has a microprocessor. The processor allows the knee to bend at a slower rate. My problem is I walked from 68 to 92 with legs that you couldn't bend the knees and not have them buckle if you bend them both at the same time. These legs, you actually can learn to ride the knees. But I'm 72 years old, so it's harder for me to get that in my brain but the legs out there, the hardest thing about prosthetics is to get the buckets to fit up on top. And you probably know that, anybody. Because they're held on by suction. And everybody's different. So when I see somebody on TV that's running, people call me on the phone, Jim, did you see that guy? He just ran this incredible time. And I go, was he a below knee or above knee? Was he one leg or two legs? Oh yeah, he's two legs, just like you, Jim. Come to find out they were both below the knee. Totally different. We call that a paper cut.
Yeah.
Oh. So what happens is that each one's different. And his legs, we don't call them stumps, but I'm going to call them stumps.
Yeah, I call them
residual leg, you know. But he's a hunter, so he'll call them stumps. So with that, the higher the legs off, the harder it is to hold the suction on. And now there's all kinds of crazy legs. They're actually putting a tube in your bone.
Oh, that metal rod.
Yeah, metal rod.
Osteogenesis or something like that.
Put the tube in there, and then you just attach to the leg, this part to that. And so I'm kind of worried about that, because at my age, I probably cut too much leg off, and then I'll be short. All right, sorry. I get rattling.
JD, what if someone's watching and they've been injured and they want to get out and go hunting? How do they reach out to you? How do you again take that first step to get back out into nature?
Well, my organization, it's as simple as an email, Mohawk Outdoors. But you know, it's you know, they might not even like hunting, but there's something outdoors that almost everybody in this crowd loves, you know, and you know, you got to get out and do those things in order to be any happy at all. But you know, I learned how to hunt from other wounded warriors, going out to, you know, being at a camp full of wounded warriors and learning things from, you know, how they draw a bow or something like that. You know, I learned from a guy that's missing an arm from California that shoots a bow with his teeth. So that's how I learned how to shoot, you know. So it's, you know, you learn from your brothers and sisters to your left and right and make it happen.
What about you? When you, if somebody wants to go fly fishing, how do they get started?
They can easily just look out, like Project Healing Waters has 220 programs, 5 different countries, I believe, and it's like 6 paid employees. So the money's going right to the vets. And same with Healing Towers. They can go right online, just sign up right there. We do a lot of battle buddy system. Like, you know, I've got vets that I find, I said, get them into a program, get them out of the house, and then I want them to battle buddy somebody else. You know, that's how we have to do it. Just kind of work together and point them to these nonprofits. But yeah, they can go right online and figure out their state and sign right up just online, real easy.
Wonderful. Well, Well, I want to thank all of you for sharing your stories. You're an amazing inspiration to all of us, and I know you provide a lot of hope to those who are out there who may be at an early stage but are going through something that you've experienced. So thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we return, we'll discuss the unseen wounds experienced by many service members and the resources available to them. More on the Wounded Warrior experience coming up.
The Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by the Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, is made possible by additional support from The Boeing Company, Military Times, the official media partner of the Wounded Warrior Experience, and the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes. This program is produced by the American Veterans Center. Visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org to learn more.
As a veteran who proudly served in Vietnam, I'm honored to support the Purple Heart Foundation. Hi, Jim Martinson here. As a result of my service, I found the transition home challenging. Often, service members come home in need of support. The Purple Heart Service Foundation is here to help. Their mission is to enhance the quality of life for all veterans and their families. Through grants and outreach programs like the National Service Officers Program, they help over 17,000 veterans per year. Advocating to ensure our veterans get the benefits they've earned and deserve, and through programs like the National Scholarship Program, where they've provided over $2 million of financial support to help with the cost of higher education. For over 60 years, the Purple Heart Foundation has been committed to supporting our nation's veterans, honoring their sacrifice with our service.
I was only 20 when a sniper shot me in the neck. I was instantly paralyzed from the chest down, but I wasn't ready to stop moving. The Independence Fund made it so I didn't have to. You know, it was bad what happened, but it never changed who I am. I just keep moving.
Be a hero for a hero. Learn more at independencefund.org.
The men and women of our armed forces work hard to protect us and our freedom. When they become civilians, we should make sure that we have their backs too. In the military, they receive a great education, learning skills in communications and technology, and practicing values like discipline and leadership. As civilians, they're an asset to any workplace that hires them. So if you're an employer, consider hiring smart and bet on a vet. To learn more, call this number or visit saluteheroes.org on the web.
Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation. In this segment, we'll discuss the unseen wounds that have plagued many veterans of our recent conflicts, post-traumatic stress, and traumatic brain injuries. Joining us for this very important segment is Juan Perez, a veteran of 2 deployments to Iraq, injured during a reconnaissance mission in Baghdad in 2005. Thank you for joining us, Juan.
Thank you.
So tell me, how did you join the military, and where were you injured, and what happened that day?
Okay. The way that I came about joining the Army was kind of like a lot of the guys after 9/11 happened. I was working as a construction worker for the union up in Detroit, Michigan. And I had been there for quite a while, so it's not like, I needed something else. But after 9/11, I just kind of felt compelled to something bigger than what I was doing. And at the time, I was married. I had 3 kids. And so it was a little bit tougher for me to get into the Army because I was a little bit older. At that time, I was already 28, and I had 3 kids. So I ended up joining. My then wife at the time, she understood, what I was thinking, what we were going to face as I was going through this process. Did my basic training or OSUT training in Kentucky. Right after that, I was stationed at Fort Carson, knowing right after I got there that I was getting deployed with my unit in 2003. It was going to be the first push wave in Iraq, OIF-1. Went through lots of training, extensive. I was out in the field all the time, hardly seeing my kids and my wife. I was just in and out all the time. Once we got deployed, boots down, I was part of a recon team. Maybe 4 months before my deployment end, my vehicle that I was on a quick reaction force, we went out. I'm not the original driver for my team. I was what they considered the dismount for my reconnaissance team, where, you know, if anything happens, they kick me out first to scout ahead, report back. I was driving at the time because my driver was out. So when I was driving out, I hit a double stack landmine on my vehicle. I was on a Bradley fighting vehicle, and where I was located, there's what we considered the engine is the pack. That's where it hit, causing my Bradley to flip up, and then came right back down, completely destroyed that other side. So I counted myself lucky, but I was actually knocked out at the time because all I could hear was just a whole bunch of ringing, and I know that my the gunner in our Bradley, he was just calling for me. And it's like I could hear him, but it was just like a lot of ringing. Next thing you know, we came under attack, and it was just a ploy for us to fall into something like that so they could attack us. Was able to live through all of that, come back. You know, some of the things that you had discussed, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, all of that played a big factor.
You didn't have any visible injuries, did you?
No, I did not have any physical injuries at that time. All of it was all internal. Unfortunately, my first wife and I went through a divorce during that process. We were called up again to get deployed. During that time, we were getting a divorce and everything, and at that time, I started, you know, dating who is now my wife, and stuck with me. I was deployed to Baghdad the second time around. At that time, I had been promoted to a sergeant in the Army after being in the Army for about 2.5 years at that time. I was also called up to be the gunner for our colonel in our squadron, which is a pretty good honor to be able to go up there and do that for him. Mm-hmm. I think I was 2.5 months into our deployment, and they called up our track to go do a mission downtown, a reconnaissance mission. Our colonel wanted to go down there just to, you know, assess what was going on. As we were getting ready to go on this reconnaissance mission, my driver wasn't around. He's the one who usually gets the track ready for us. I think he was pulling talk duty, which means manning the radios at that time.
Yeah.
What happened was I was on the Bradley getting everything ready, getting the ammo ready and everything, and I just at that time I knew that I got hit in my head by something, but I didn't know at the time what it was. I just know at the time I had been messing around with ammo cans, and there were industrial-sized bungee cords and everything there. When I came around to, my wife says that I talked to her prior to me being flown out to Germany, where I had spent a couple weeks there, but I don't remember anything in between that. I just remember that at that time I had no eyesight to my left eye. I had sustained a traumatic blunt force trauma, injured both my shoulders at the time as well.
What signs that you had post-traumatic stress, and how did you deal with it? We only have a couple minutes left, but yes. I want to hear about what the signs were, and how do you know when you're suffering from post-traumatic stress?
You're closed off to everybody. Sometimes you lash out. You don't mean to, but that's kind of your response and your security, you know, protecting yourself. I know that I had gotten loud quite a few times with my wife and my kids, some of the people that I've been around. I think a lot of my traumatic brain injury, because I did have seizures and stuff like that, sustaining from that blunt force trauma as well, played a big factor in it.
What was your darkest time?
My darkest time was when they told me they were going to be medically discharging me from the military. There was no indication of them wanting to even reclassify me for anything else because I was a scout, and if I couldn't shoot, their exact words, if I couldn't shoot, they couldn't sustain me. And so...
And what advice do you have from anyone who's suffering from post-traumatic stress?
Reach out. Definitely reach out. Your loved ones are always there for you. They're always going to be there, just like my wife was there for me. She wasn't my wife at the time, we were just dating, but she stuck around through all this. People are there for you. Your brothers and sisters in arms, reach out to them. Those are the people that are going to carry you through your darkest times, and that's what helped me.
Yeah. Thank you, Juan. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm glad to see you're doing so well.
Thank you.
Thank you. In our final segment, we'll focus on an often overlooked part of the Wounded Warrior experience, the caregivers who help make their recoveries possible. That's next when the Wounded Warrior experience, presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, continues.
The Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by the Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, is made possible by additional support from the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, American Airlines, the official airline of the Wounded Warrior Experience, Flying Circle, and the Independence Fund.
As a veteran who proudly served in Vietnam, I'm honored to support the Purple Heart Foundation. Hi, Jim Martinson here. As a result of my service, I found the transition home challenging. Often, service members come home in need of support. The Purple Heart Service Foundation is here to help. Their mission is to enhance the quality of life for all veterans and their families. Through grants and outreach programs like the National Service Officers Program, they help over 17,000 veterans per year. Advocating to ensure our veterans get the benefits they've earned and deserve, and through programs like the National Scholarship Program, where they've provided over $2 million of financial support to help with the cost of higher education. For over 60 years, the Purple Heart Foundation has been committed to supporting our nation's veterans, honoring their sacrifice with our service.
Our veterans are our nation's heroes, yet their suicide rate is way higher than average. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is often to blame. Symptoms such as flashbacks and depression may be hidden by a veteran, often because of stigma. PTSD is a treatable medical condition and should be handled with compassion and understanding. Call this number or visit saluteheroes.org to learn more. You could be saving a life.
I was only 20 when a sniper shot me in the neck. I was instantly paralyzed from the chest down, but I wasn't ready to stop moving. The Independence Fund made it so I didn't have to. You know, it was bad what happened, but it never changed who I am. I just keep moving.
Be a hero for a hero. Learn more at independencefund.org.
The Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by the Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, is made possible by additional support from the Independence Fund, the Boeing Company, and Military Times.
Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience. For a wounded warrior, his or her experience does not end with their return home and discharge from a military hospital. It continues long after for them and for their families. In this segment, we'll spotlight wounded warriors and the caregivers who provide aid and support during their recovery. Joining us are Alex Waragai, Army paratrooper wounded in Afghanistan, and his wife and primary caregiver, Isa Waragai. Also joining us are Dillon Cannon, paralyzed by a sniper bullet in Iraq, and his mother and primary caregiver, Patti Cannon. Thank you all for being with us. Alex and Isa, let's start with you. Alex, tell me about, just very briefly, where you were wounded, and then how, I know both of you have been involved with the Independence Fund, and when did you intersect the Independence Fund, and how did they help you come out of the darkest times that you were facing?
So I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, and did 11 years in the military. During my third tour in Afghanistan, what happened is we had found one of our squads had found an IED, and so they called, the protocol is they call EOD, and then another infantry squad has to escort them out to the site. And so once we got on site, my squad and I spotted a secondary device. And so I sent all my guys in, took some pictures, briefed the EOD guy, and my team leader said that they thought they had found the third device. And so walking towards the third device, I stepped on IED, which I lost both legs, 2 fingertips, and then my hearing on my right ear.
Isa, what is the hardest part about being a caregiver, and what do people not understand about the responsibility that you have?
Right. Well, I think the hardest part is that I'm constantly in a balance act, between how much care do I provide and how much independence does he need to maintain. And so it's really kind of hard to find the right balance between, when he falls down, do I help him get up or do I let him get up by himself? And that's just an everyday thing that we go through. But yeah, and also maintaining my own self, my own identity. I'm a student, I'm a mom, I've got my own life too, so being a caregiver and balancing that has been difficult.
Dillon, tell us where you were injured, when you were injured, and how your mom helps you.
My name's Dillon Cannon. I was with the 571st MP Company. We were stationed in Bakuba, Iraq. I was the gunner for our truck, and a sniper bullet hit me in the front of the neck and came out the back of my neck, hitting my 6 and C7 vertebrae and shattering both of those. My mom is an amazing person. She helps me in ways that I honestly just can't say thank you, but she keeps me going, and just like she said, it is a balancing act between, how much she should let me do and how much, she should step in.
Patti, what's the hardest part about being a caregiver? What do people not see?
Again, it's the balancing act. It's the line between enabling and helping and not knowing which, and the heartbreak, when you say, when he wants you to help him do something, and I know if he just tried a little bit, he could do it, but it's so hard to say no, and he gets frustrated, and then I have to leave the room so I can go and cry because I feel so bad for saying no, and he has a sister that's 10 years younger, so it's, paying attention and doing things with her and him, not doing the same, liking to do the same things. It's just.
How did the Independence Fund help you as caregivers and you as patients?
Well, with me personally, their Independence Fund is doing lots of amazing things. One of them is they're advocating for us in DC, to get. There's 24 catastrophically injured veterans that fit that label, catastrophically injured, and they're advocating for us to get kind of I won't say like a special label, but basically we don't have to face the bureaucracy of the VA. But that's just one of the other things that I've recently picked up with skydiving. And so the Independence Fund has started a program that does adaptive sports, and so they've paid for all my skydiving equipment, which is right now I get frustrated when I don't go skydiving. So it's a drug that it's replaced that adrenaline from combat for me personally, and so I'm an adrenaline junkie and I need that adrenaline.
How did the Independence Fund help you?
Well, I don't appreciate the skydiving. I feel like he's had enough, brushes with death. I understand he needs that adrenaline, but the Independence Fund, they do everything. They go from helping caregivers. They really focus. They're one of the few organizations that focuses on caregivers, by providing caregiver retreats and, stuff like that. But honestly, when he's happy, I'm usually happy. So anything that the Independence Fund can do to help him, it makes me happy too. So,
Dillon, if you could change one thing about the VA, what would it be?
I would say the way that they keep making yourself prove that you're still injured when you have an injury that's permanent, and they they'll call you every 6 months asking you to do a reevaluation, and it's not going to get any better. A spinal cord injury, it's not going to grow back. It gets kind of annoying.
I've heard of some who are amputees having to drive all the way across the state to the VA hospital every 6 months to prove that they still have missing limbs.
Yes, that's very
ridiculous. That's ridiculous. What would you say in terms of changes that have been made? Do you want to choose your healthcare provider, or is it better to have the VA assign you a healthcare provider? What's the right balance?
Choice. We want to be able to choose the doctor that takes care of him. But there's a lot of I hate to say it, but there's just a lot of folks at the VA whose hearts aren't in it. Mm-hmm. They're there for the paycheck. They're not empathetic. I just wish we could see any doctor there.
And it's my understanding that the president has signed legislation to change that. Is that in effect now for you? Can you choose your healthcare providers?
Only if they come and they have a meeting and they deem that they can't actually help you, then they'll allow you to go choose other care. It's still a great thing, because you didn't have that option before. It was just like, hey, we suck, we're not going to get it done, then you're stuck with us. But now you actually have the choice that you can call the meeting and you can say, I don't think I'm getting the best care. And then if everybody comes in agreement, then you can go get
We haven't faced that particular issue, but I just wonder if, there's so many different things that you would have to prove. Like there's certain distance you can't get to it quick enough. Well, we're within a certain distance, so that wouldn't work for us. Dealing with the VA is war. It's horrible.
The VA has a caregiver program. How is that working? And is it serving you as caregivers?
Well, it's kind of like what Dillon said. You have to fight with the VA, and not everything's bad. There are a lot of people who work for the VA that are wonderful people, but I think it's the system that's in place. As a caregiver, you have to go through yearly evaluations to see if he still needs a caregiver. They consider it a temporary program. His injuries aren't temporary. Like you said, the limbs are not going to grow back.
So for these 2,400 catastrophically injured vets, they really need part of that VA caregiver program to say, if you're one of those vets, your caregiver, this is a caregiver for life. It's not something that you're going to outgrow after 6 months. And what about trying to work while you're a caregiver? Can you?
Are
you supposed to?
Right, I go to school, but there's a lot of things that people don't understand. There are a lot of things I have to do in order to go to an evening class. There are a lot of things I have to do to make sure he doesn't turn on the stove because he'll forget, and he'll forget it's on. So, something as simple as cooking a meal becomes, he could burn down the house if he tried to do it, because he has a moderate TBI, so.
What are some of the most important things that your wife, your mother do for you that you would need them to have that caregiver status from the VA, and it would help in terms of just reducing some of the stress?
She does a lot of things, like she said, she does do like meal preps and makes sure that she takes any steps. We have 3 kids, so she, kind of preps everything before she goes to school and makes it easy. But, she does awesome as a caregiver, so.
I honestly just say, if I accidentally go over a bump too quick and I flip backwards out of my wheelchair, that's one of the things that I have difficulty with is, now I'm stuck on my back, so.
And tell me more about the Independence Fund and what they've provided you. Wheelchairs, prosthetics, anything that you can tell me about?
Well, Dillon was one of the first recipients of one of their track chairs. He didn't think he would ever go outside and do anything ever again.
And a track chair, explain what that is.
Well, the track chair, it's basically a wheelchair with tank treads on it. We started an LLC where we take injured kids and injured veterans out, paintballing, hunting, and just showing them that they can get back and actually do something that with paintball, you can practice everything that you learned in war and not have to worry about actually getting shot. So it's one thing that breaks the barrier that some veterans have with PTSD and not wanting to get out and do anything like that. So
and that's down in Texas?
Yes, ma'am.
You're down in Texas. So if you're out there and you want to go paintballing with Dillon, there are track chairs, there are wheelchairs to get you out and to overcome these injuries.
Yes, ma'am.
Patty, what else would you change about the VA?
I guess consistency. As far as the caregiver program, there's, I know that there's been a lot of work done on it, but it's still not consistent. And proving that your injury is still what it was. And it's mostly consistency. That we've got, it's tiers, it's 1, 2, and 3, and 1 being the lowest, 3 being the highest. Well, you've got some folks that are tier 3 that have way less severe injuries than some people who are on tier 1, and which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And that's something we've been fighting for years.
Alex, what would you like people to know who, it's been a number of years since you've been injured, you've gone through different phases of your recovery. What do you want civilians out there to understand about what you and your wife and your mom, who are caregivers, need from the civilian population who maybe doesn't understand what you've been through?
I think anybody that's been listening to tonight understands that the community is a big part of our recovery, right? Both mentally and every aspect of it. I went through a period, I was an infantry squad leader with 82nd Airborne Division, just, hard-driven infantry guys that are taught that weakness is not it's not acceptable, so you get out and then things get quiet. You go to Walter, you're going to recovery, you're doing adaptive sports, you're staying busy, but then you get home and all that stops, and then you start going through the PTSD phase of it, or start going through survival skill, and so it really takes the community to get involved in these programs to get us out again and help us through that recovery.
What would you say to caregivers who are out there who maybe are at their rope's end right now?
Self-care. Self-care. I know I think as mothers, not even just in the caregiver aspect, as mothers, you tend to put everybody before yourself, but as a caregiver, you feel like, and usually you do have to put, him before me, and a lot of times you just get mentally exhausted. It's completely normal, just self-care. If you need to take a minute away, I'll take a drive. I'll just go drive for an hour. So self-care.
Yeah, and it's a 24/7 job, and you guys are young, and you're going to live long lives, and you've got wives and mothers who are there who are going to be taking care of you, and society is going to have to understand that that's really part of the contract and the compact that we made with our military when we sent you off to war. So thank you for sharing your stories. It's such an important subject, and I'm just grateful to have all of you here today.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
On behalf of the American Veterans Center, thank you for being with us for this year's discussion on the Wounded Warrior Experience. A special thank you goes to our presenting sponsor, Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, with support from the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, the Boeing Company, the Independence Fund, American Airlines, Veterans United Home Loans, Northrop Grumman, Saab Defense and Security, Maglite, Daniel Morgan Graduate School of National Security, and Military Times. And finally, thank you to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. for being such gracious hosts. And to all of our servicemen and women of every generation, thank you for your service.